would like you to comment on the Congress of our party here, which you are going to assist.
Well, first of all, the 24th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union is indeed a world event. Its outcome will be a determining factor not only for the fuller development of the already high living and cultural standards of the Soviet people, but will also have a very marked influence even on the struggle for better living conditions by the working people in the capitalist world.
It is now all of 13 centuries since Finbar and his monks lived their lives of quiet inspiration at Gugon Barra in the mountains of West Cork. Holy men of no property, living in community, they were, if you like, early communists. Perhaps then it is some dialectic of coincidence that brings Michael O'Riordan back to this lonely sanctuary, a place which in the 7th century sustained Finbar, Bishop of Cork, and now in the 20th influences O'Riordan, Secretary of the Communist Party of Ireland. In 1954, Catholic voters in Dublin were told from the pulpits not to vote for the Red O'Riordan. Today he is the respectable middle-aged leader of our respectable middle-aged Communist Party. He was born, he likes to remember, just 4 days after the Russian Revolution of November 1917.
Товарищи, рабоче-крестьянская революция, о необходимости которой все время говорили большевики, совершилась!
The red star that glared over the summer palace in Petrograd illuminated an all but bloodless revolution. Somewhat to the disappointment of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, this isolated event did not spark off the expected world revolution. Nevertheless, this was Marxism in practice, the class war skidding violently into the contented mind of Europe. Far away in bourgeois Cork, the infant O'Riordan slept, heedless of the new fortunes of communism with a religion that was to shape his life.
It's a science insofar as it does reveal certain laws of social development. Above all, I think, such as the revolutionary role of the working classes, the force is going to change society, both in the Irish scale and in the world scale. But it's not only a science, I think it's also a human philosophy, because I think it is based above all on people. People are the forces that make history, and I think communism is primarily concerned with people. And that's why we are concerned with the aim of abolishing poverty, which is probably the most degrading element in sort of dehumanizing human beings, and in every way trying to sort of uplift the dignity of man in society by the creation of a just social system. And of course, to do this means the ending of capitalism and imperialism.
Well, my mother's mother, my grandmother, was a Cronin, and I think the name is associated with this area, Gugon Barra. My father came from Inchinossick. My godfather was Sean Fotherton, came in here. And my godmother was in Bellavorna, so my roots are here. And I'm not only proud of that, of the personal connections, but I'm also very proud of the sort of background of struggle here, because here you have the scenes of the struggle of in the Battle of Kemenea, Cork Kemenea, at the Tights War. You had another relation of mine, rather distant relation, but a man I knew very well, did 5 years penal servitude. That was Mickey Welch of Turing Dove, for agrarian activity. He was a bit subversive in his time. And there are many other such as locations here of the struggles during the Tan War and Civil War.
O'Riordan was born on Pope's Quay in Cork City, the son of a docker. By the age of 18, he had been to school with Jack Lynch, joined the IRA and come close to the Irish Communists. A century ago, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels supported the cause of the Fenian prisoners. A branch of the First Communist International sprung up in Cork in 1870. Marx, Engels and Lenin all believed that nationalism had a valid part to play in the class struggle. The youthful O'Riordan found no difficulty in reconciling his two political concerns.
Well, I think it's quite logical for a Republican to become a communist. And personally, I think the sort of formative influence of myself becoming a communist, I think I could date it from the day that I picked up Connolly's Labour and Irish History and read for the first time, his Marxist interpretation of Irish history, in which he brings out the whole scope of the struggle for national independence in this country and the real sort of unselfish role of the working people. And as you know, he sort of draws his conclusions from his whole study of Irish history with the very apt quotation that only the working class remain as the incorruptible inheritors of the struggle for Irish freedom. So I think that you develop beyond the pure sentimental patriotic Republican approach to a really scientific revolutionary approach is quite logical, and I think it's also quite necessary.
In March of '38, he was smuggled across the Pyrenees to join the Irish section of the International Brigade. Yet was it science or sentiment that brought Michael O'Riordan to Spain at a time when he was already convinced that the Spanish Republic would be defeated by Franco? Or was it simply an expression of solidarity, that bulging portmanteau of the left-wing conscience? It was all of these, allied to an intense dislike of the militant pro-Franco propaganda at home in Ireland.
Well, the struggle in Spain, the revolt of the fascist generals against the Spanish Republican government was a world issue, actually. I think it had particular sort of reverberations in this country, because with the revolt of the generals in July 1936, you have the formation of the Irish Christian Front, which was an avowedly pro-Franco organisation. You had O'Duffy and the Blue Shirts organising a crusade, as they called it, to defend the church in Spain. And this posed a challenge. It posed a challenge for two reasons. That we considered as Irishmen that the good name of our country was at stake, that our country was lined up with the Franco forces, fascist forces, and therefore there was a need for some group of people to certainly make clear that this was not typical of Ireland, that there was in Ireland sympathy for the Spanish Republican struggle. Outside of that also, of course, as this peculiar Irish reaction, there was the old good international solidarity angle. In other words, that wherever people are fighting for freedom, they must be supported by people elsewhere. And this concept of international solidarity is one of the sort of basic tenets, actually, of the communist socialist, and I would even say so, of the broad general and labour movement.
Almost 150 Irishmen fought against Franco in Spain. Of this number, nearly half were killed. O'Riordan was wounded by shrapnel at the Battle of the Ebro. Cork City showed a decided reluctance to welcome him home.
Well, I think I was locally regarded as being a sort of antichrist, because during the Spanish struggle itself, there was tremendous support for Franco in this country and in this city also. There was an organisation called the Irish Christian Front, which whipped up considerable hysteria, I would say. And generally there began a campaign which fooled the people, I think, on the question of the real issues in Spain. And the war was presented as a war for the defence of Christianity. So when I came back, the reception was not a very warm one. It was very cold, very hostile. But in a period of time, I think people began to reassess their attitudes to the issues in Spain.
Why do you think they were able to reassess them? What caused them to do so?
Well, I think the outbreak of World War II in 1939, to a certain extent, brought the whole question of Nazism and fascism to the forefront of people's minds. And as the war went on, and as the war drew to a conclusion, of course, there was the greater knowledge of the real character of fascism as revealed in the the stories and pictures and the facts with the concentration camps, the racial persecution, and the general behaviour of Nazism and its attitude to peoples.
He didn't find it easy to get a job. Being in the IRA under Tom Barry was one thing in the minds of decent Corkonians. Fighting fascism in Spain was quite something else. Cork and O'Riordan learned about internment camps at home before they knew about concentration camps in Germany. He re-established his connections with the Republican movement, but disapproved of the IRA's bombing campaign in England. Nonetheless, he was one of the first to be interned in the Curragh, where he was kept for 4 years. Eventually, O'Riordan was employed as a bus conductor by CIE. While in the Curragh internment camp, he was active in the mini-university run by the Communist and Republican internees. He taught Marxist-Leninism. He was never tempted to support the German cause, as so many Republicans did. He didn't agree that England's enemy was of necessity Ireland's friend. After his release at Christmas 1943, he knew clearly where his political future might be. During his 20 years with CIE, he ran for election as a Socialist Irish Workers' League candidate and quickly became a bogeyman in the eyes of the church.
In 1951, when I stood as the candidate of the Irish Workers' Party for Dublin South West, the Archbishop issued a statement which was read in all the churches in the constituency, indicating that if anybody who voted for myself would be guilty of mortal sin. Now, when I heard of this letter, actually, I tried to get a copy of it because it was, in my opinion, libelous in the sense of interfering with the due process of electoral law, etc. And I failed because obviously the letters had been distributed to the police in the morning and all taken back again, and so no copies of this were available. But a paper called The Standard, which still exists, did publish, if not the text, the essence of the statement by the Archbishop in a box, and also headlined their current issue with a big block heading, "You can't vote for the Red O'Riordan." And they also had their posters, you know, the contents posters with the same slogan, "You can't vote for the Red O'Riordan."
Comrades, you've heard the report on the four-party common market talks. Any questions?
Well, Nick,
Sam Nolan.
you mentioned the united action by the labour movement in these 4 countries.
The McCarthyite campaign against O'Riordan and the Irish Workers' League, now the Communist Party of Ireland, effectively put paid to his chances of election. Today, in a changed climate, he attends meetings of a 32-county party and works from premises in Pembroke Lane in Dublin, given to the movement by an Anglo-Irishman named Neil Verscoil Gould, who for many years now has lived in Moscow. O'Riordan describes the structure of the party in terms familiar to any orthodox communist.
Well, our party is based upon the organisational principles, as any Marxist-Leninist party is based on the organisational principles called democratic centralism. And that is that you have a combination of the sort of leadership of the leading committee and the authority of the leading committee to sort of issue statements and take decisions which are binding on the other members of the party itself. But side by that, this is balanced by the other aspect of democratic centralism, that's democracy. In other words, there's always a full discussion in the party. And every action of the leadership of the executive committee, there are always regular reports back. And I think, strictly speaking, that there's more democracy in the Communist Party than the other party, because it's part of the integral sort of life of the party, where we put the emphasis on collective discussion and collective decisions. So this is the answer to your question, I think, in the sense of the level and the type of discipline that exists in the party. It's a voluntary discipline, and we think that it arises from the fact that most people who join the Communist Party are people who are already somewhat well advanced politically and are conscious of the decision they're taking and take part in the collective discussions, the collective decisions, and carry it through in a united fashion.
This courteous democracy of a minute party is far from the dictatorship of the proletariat dreamt of by Karl Marx so long ago. But it did allow me to ask O'Riordan in the Belfast office just how many members the Irish party does have.
I'm not going to give you an exact figure, and I'm not going to make an exaggerated sort of estimation or give an exaggerated account of our membership as such. As far as the party is concerned, in Dublin it is mostly based. We have 9 branches in Dublin. In Belfast we have a number of branches, including factory branches, by the way. In Cork we have a branch, in Mayo and Waterford, and in other parts of the country we have different groups. But what we have, as you know, is the structure of a one all-Ireland party, where we have reflected on our national executive the party in its strongest points in Dublin and Belfast, and at the same time reflecting the people from the countryside who are also members of the party.
Well, you said you wouldn't give an exaggerated estimate of your membership. Would you like to give a non-exaggerated?
No, I wouldn't give any estimation, actually, because I could tell you a lie and give you a false figure.
His reticence is understandable. When Michael O'Riordan leaves Ireland for points east, as he regularly does, he carries with him the united sentiment of a party of hardly more than a few hundred members, although it is safe to say that many of these exercise considerable executive or personal influence in organisations ranging from their own trade unions to the Civil Rights Association in the north. Last March he went as a fraternal delegate to the annual conference of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. It is at such Moscow occasions as this that men and women who have worked loyally for communism find a particular satisfaction. Delegates from outside the Soviet Union, particularly those from parties of small membership, find in Moscow a strengthening of conviction. Medals and decorations which in Ireland might carry as much weight as Boy Scouts badges, here are shared, understood and appreciated. When speaking in Ireland's name to the Great Party Conference, does it matter that half Ireland assumes that Irish communism is supported by Soviet funds?
The oldest fairy tale in the international labour movement, this question of support from Moscow. I mean, before Moscow was ever featured on the world scene as a revolutionary capital, the sort of alleged source of revolutionary activities in Ireland was either German gold or even before that French gold. So, take your choice.
But no Moscow rubles?
No Moscow rubles whatsoever. No.
What links are there with Moscow?
Well, we have the same fraternal relations with the Communist Party of the Soviet Union as we have with most of the other communist parties. We attend their party congresses, which we have attended. I attended the last one myself in last March, the 24th Party Congress. We invite them to attend our party congresses, along with their delegates from the other parties of the socialist countries and the non-socialist countries. And at our Congress, our 15th Congress of our party in October 16 and 17 in Belfast, we will have fraternal delegates from the Soviet Union, from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Romania, from Yugoslavia, and also from the United States, Great Britain, and particularly this time we will have the fraternal delegations from the parties of Denmark, Norway and Sweden, because of the common concern we have with them on this question of the common market.
Michael O'Riordan's attitude to the common market will at least be understood by Irish people. They found it harder to accept Moscow's hard line in 1956 against a Hungary reverting to Stalinism. The movement here was weak at the time. Many members defected, but there was no repudiation of Khrushchev's action. A conflict of a different kind resulted in the suppression by Moscow of a Czechoslovakia being westernized by Dubček. Even those who disapproved could this time understand at least the ideological basis for repression. But the Communist Party of Ireland tends to ignore outside traumas and tensions. It has been silent in response to recent allegations that Jews are now persecuted in the Soviet Union. Dublin Jews have fasted in protest, but Michael O'Riordan says his party's silence is not a policy of evasion, but a question of local priorities.
We're not this phrasing of being sort of communist or of Moscow orientated is not correct. The fact is that if we have a certain viewpoint that coincides with the Soviet Party viewpoint, it is because there's a collective discussion not only in our own party, but in the whole world movement from which certain conclusions are drawn. Let me give you one example. In 1961, we stood at election on the platform of opposition to the common market. Now, this was unique in the sense it was the first time that the opposition to the common market was put in as a political platform in that election.
As far back as 1961?
Yes, it's 10 years ago. Actually, the Soviet Union hadn't yet declared its attitude to the common market. So if you say that the Irish communists adopt a certain line that coincides with Moscow, and this is interpreted as taking orders from Moscow, we could say that we adopt a certain line in the common market and the Soviet Union adopts a similar line subsequently. We could say that Moscow is taking orders from Dublin.
Hello?
Yes. Hello? I'm Belfast.
Speaking? Yes.
Just a second. I'm Kiev.
A phone call from the city of Kiev in the Ukraine catches up with Michael O'Riordan in the Belfast office of the party. The journalist on the line wants Comrade O'Riordan's impressions of Northern Ireland events for publication in the Ukrainian People's Gazette.
Well, I think the present events in Belfast and in Derry and other parts of the northern part of Ireland demonstrates the unchangeable character of British imperialism in Ireland. The jails are full of people, and in the last week over 300 people have been taken from their homes and interned, that is, put in prison without any charges or without any trial.
The Ukrainian newspaper was given a full account of the northern situation by Michael O'Riordan, all of it couched by him in the formalistic prose which characterizes communist exposition. He ended by conveying to the people of the Republic of the Ukraine the fraternal greetings of, etc., etc. But the stilted expression of international fraternity is not quite the same thing as the work of the party on the ground in Belfast, or its attitude towards such tragic burnings as Farringdon Gardens. The party is totally free of sectarianism and is firm in its opposition to violence. With a foot in both sections of the working class, and with its clear understanding that Belfast now epitomizes the contradictions of Irish social history, it is perhaps a pity that the party has not won a greater voice, since its work on the executive of the Civil Rights Association and in the trade unions has been both temperate and sensible.
Well, we don't claim to have a very solid base amongst the Protestant working people, but we have members of our party who work in the shipyards, we have members of our party who work in the aircraft factory, we have members of our party who work in other concerns here, where there is largely members of the Protestant working class.
Have you any members who hold executive positions of any authority in the unions?
Well, I think the chairman of our party, Comrade Andrew Barr, is the member of the Northern Ireland Committee of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. Incidentally, he's also a member of the Executive Committee of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions on an all-Ireland basis. He's the Secretary of the Sheet Metal Workers Union. He's the Secretary of the Confederation of Shipbuilding and Engineering Unions, which is the sort of the grouping together of all the unions involved in engineering and shipbuilding. We have comrades in the Belfast Trades Council. We have comrades in who are working as leading shop stewards and shop steward conveners in various industries. And I think it is a fact that they are playing a very, very positive role to divert the attempt to create sectarian warfare here in Belfast.
The Communist Party is usually ready to share any Popular Front platform, and O'Riordan predictably spoke at rallies in Dublin against internment in the north.
And this, I think, is our most important weapon, this weapon of unity. Because we have lived to see a day that somebody would say would have been impossible, to see a situation in the north where the Unionist Party was split wide open, to see a situation in Dublin where the Fianna Fáil government was split wide open. Let's keep that split as wide and as open as we possibly can, and we can do it by cementing the unity of all the forces, of all the persons, of all the organisations who are opposed both to unionism and to Fianna Fáilism.
Michael O'Riordan has worked hard for his ideal. An old-style Leninist, he never quite sloughed off the republicanism of his youth. The Soviet Union may be his promised land, but the Irish working class is his chosen territory. Social reformers are optimists by definition, and Mick O'Riordan doggedly believes in the inevitable triumph of the working class, and in some future Marxist society that will find room too for the muskery of his childhood.
And I think looking ahead, and not even looking so far ahead, I think we sort of reached a stage in this country where there's a crisis, a political crisis. Well, now, I don't want to jargonise, but I would call that the crisis of British imperialist rule in Ireland. And when I use the word imperialist, I don't mean in a narrow sort of propagandistic old-fashioned cliché. Because if anybody has any illusions about imperialism in Ireland, they've seen it at least in action in the north in recent times. But also in the south, in the form of the imperialist monopoly domination of the economy, the takeovers, the mergers, the property buy-ups, etc. So you have, in a certain extent, a strengthening of British imperialist rule. But I think the main thing is that imperialism is a dying system. It's had it. It's still very powerful. And I think that the reason why it has had it is that the whole balance of world forces have tilted against imperialism in the direction of the national independence, national liberation, and for socialism. And I think in that context, we are going to see a new Ireland, a socialist Ireland, built by the unity of the working people, north and south, Catholic and Protestant.